Nigeria says about 70% of the officers of the Nigerian Armed Forces are currently engaged in domestic policing operations. Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustapha, said this on Tuesday in Lagos while presenting the keynote speech during the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry 2022 Security Meet Business Dialogue Series. Mustapha, who was represented by the Permanent Secretary for Political Economic Affairs, Office of the SGF, Andrew Adejo, said although that is not what the army is supposed to do, the federal government has to do whatever it takes to solve Nigeria's security problems. Joining us now to look at what the data portends for national security and how to free members of the armed forces from internal police duties is a security analyst, Dr. Kabiru Adamu. Thanks for joining us on Newsday.
My pleasure. Good afternoon.
Now, the federal government says about 70% of military personnel, which is quite an alarming number, are engaged in domestic policing. How did this happen? Who is to blame?
Well, first off, I guess it's a consequence of the long period of military rule in the country. Some academic reports have also attributed it to the failure of the police in terms of meeting their constitutional mandate for internal security, and that failure has created gaps that has now made it almost necessary for the military to come up and fill up those gaps. Others are also of the view that perhaps there is what has been described as the political economy of the funding of operations, and that's, I think, a very big phrase for terming corruption. Desire to participate in that funding, that the political economy of the funding, makes some of these military departments to be interested in taking part in internal security operations. Then there is also the political angle where the politicians themselves, especially political appointees, have to an extent preference for military involvement in some of these security operations. And I can give you examples for this regard in the course of our conversations, where governors, as an example, or ministers would directly either object or request for the military to be involved in certain internal security operations. And then lastly, I think we, the citizens ourselves too, unfortunately, perhaps again as a result of this long military rule, have become so accustomed to having the military involved in internal security matters. And so in certain areas where there are no military presence, citizens calling for the military to be deployed in certain operations. So suffice to say that at the moment, the military is involved in several internal security operations. And I'm happy that one of the coordinators within our national security architecture, who is the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, is the one making this statement. So perhaps with this recognition, we would see some changes that would reduce this involvement of the military in internal security operations.
And Dr. Kabir, with the way it is so intertwined, especially with how you've explained it, it's quite endemic. How is it even possible to begin to dismantle or delineate the roles? Is it something that can be done, or will we just have to manage with the way this is?
So that I'm very clear in my response, it is a matter of our national survival that we correct this abnormal situation. The military constitutionally is not meant to be involved in internal security operations, except in cases of insurrection or certain security threat factors that have reached situations that cannot be managed by the police. It is a misnomer to have the military carrying on an operation for more than a decade. A good example is Operation Safe Haven in Plateau State. That operation has been going on, if I'm right, for almost 15 years. Right now, it's abnormal and it shouldn't be the case. Now, what can be done? And I must commend the current service chiefs, especially the Chief of Defense Staff, He recognizes this, and I know he has organized several roundtables, several meetings, several conferences to find the right way to create the architecture, as it were, and the framework for better collaboration, better coordination, and better cooperation between the various ministries, departments, and agencies that are involved in security. Now, I'm not in any way suggesting that the military should just pull out. It will be disastrous, because those gaps do exist, and those gaps must be filled, and they're currently filling those gaps. But then how do the other security organizations increase their capacity as well as their capability to take up the constitutional responsibilities that they've been? And I think this is where the coordinating elements within the national security architecture must come in. I've advocated for the introduction of a monitoring and evaluation framework that would allow those coordinators to see the contribution. Now, if I must mention this, there are 27 ministries, departments, and agencies that are involved in security. The military occupies only 4 of those 27. So the other 23 must play their part. If we take border security as an example, or border management, there are organizations that are really critical here, and that is the Immigration Service and the Customs. Now, where they are not playing their role and the military is forced to participate in that role, the only way to ensure that the military reduces that participation is for these other 2 organizations to increase their capacity and capability. And that is where this coordinating element must now play their role. And I'm very happy with the developments yesterday at the National Assembly, where we're envisaging 2 changes to the security architecture that would allow the legislature to play a bigger role in monitoring the activities of these 20 departments and agencies. Once that is done, it would allow the military to focus on its primary mandate, and then hopefully these other organizations would take up these aspects of internal security that the military is currently handling.
Well, Dr. Kabir, quickly, if you can, the judiciary has been charged with doing more to actually help the security agencies by picking up the pace when it comes to, executing judgment in criminal cases. Are you content with their pace, or how do you see it?
Especially if we look at the administration of criminal justice, yes, the security organizations, agencies have a role to play, but they are only one aspect of the multitude of contributors within that administration of criminal justice. So if we look at the area of, for instance, arrest and gathering of evidence, yes, they can play a critical role, because no matter how well I hate the face of a suspect, if I'm a judge, if the prosecutors, for instance, or the security agencies do not present evidence to back that accusation, then I'm likely to let that person free. And so that is, I think, the area that we need to focus on going forward in terms of improving the contribution of these security agencies to the administration of criminal justice system. They need to be trained on how to gather and preserve this evidence. The right infrastructure for gathering and protecting that evidence needs to be provided. I'm shocked, and this is something that as a journalist I urge you to look at. Almost all the security organizations that we have do not have evidence rooms that of standard, where if you keep evidence, the likelihood of that evidence being tampered with is certain. So again, that is another area. Then how do you move that evidence in a manner that is acceptable and within the precepts of our judicial system to the courts for that evidence to support the case that you are doing? So a lot needs to be done in that regard. It's very easy, for instance, to look at it, just superficially, but when we don't deconstruct all of these elements, and unfortunately, we will not get our read. And I'm happy that at some point, this current administration realized this. And of course, they made some changes within the administration.
Well, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, apologies for interjecting, but thank you so much for always joining the program and giving us very good information on the subject.